Hi, Omar. How are you doing?
I'm good. Ishrar, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining me for coffee. And how's your coffee?
My coffee is warm. I don't like it too hot, actually.
Okay, mine's too sweet.
Yeah.
So, how's it going? It's been a while we've actually caught up with each other.
Yeah, it has been. So, yeah, it's going good. So, like, when I joined, I think, like, you were one of the first people I worked with.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember our project together, the
Yes.
We Talent platform.
No, it's
Get Talent platform.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So, good news.
Yeah.
That project has actually resurfaced in a good way.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Okay.
Sven is back with us. So, like, Enterprise is actually working on a project with them. So,
Oh, cool. Has it become like bigger than it was? Because I remember it was just like a very small one-person project.
I mean, it's still in its early stages, but there's a specific vision behind it now. So it's actually very nice to see it kind of come back after all these years.
Yeah.
So it's been like 4 years since that project came about.
So also that's how long
That's
you've been
I've
here.
been here. Exactly.
4 years. Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, I have another, like my last day is the end of October next month. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a real wild ride with SELISE. I mean, in the best possible
For
way,
sure.
of course, because I would say even in my like first year at SELISE, I learned more than I could have learned anywhere else, honestly. I would say before joining SELISE, I was in the advertising industry.
Yeah.
So that had different sets of skills and pressure, and it wasn't really, it was my wheelhouse because I did like working with, photo manipulation and illustrative tools and getting super creative with that. But I felt like user experience design was like the next level, next logical progression for me.
And it's very different, like, because here you don't just work on your design or just your area of expertise. You have to collaborate and work with many different kinds of people. Because mine is a completely different side. I'm only supposed to be concerned with the business side, but that's not what happens in reality. I have to work so closely with the developers and the designers. It becomes an inherent part of you, and you start to understand so many of the terminologies, and
Yeah,
you
of
feel
course.
like, okay, this is what I do as well. Like, I understand development.
So like that's the thing. Like even I've had to understand how the development process goes
Exactly.
about. Even if I'm not really understanding like all the coding aspects of things.
Yeah.
It really depends on who you're working with and how much information you can gain from them as well. Some people are very very upfront and very specific about it, and that's where I'd say I learned quite a bit. Like
Exactly.
even if it's not about applying myself, but also how I'm applying my collaboration with everyone else. Like that's one of the most important things I've learned here, because you have to kind of get out of your comfort zone, share what you're comfortable with as well, also understand everyone else's viewpoint, and just find common ground and build something together. So 4 years, 4.5 years actually. So joined in April 2018, had a 3-month evaluation period, and then became permanent, like right in like July to June, like perfect alignment. But
So do you feel that because design and development, they go so much hand in hand, they're very closely connected, because like in order to make any software application, you definitely need a design. So do you feel like they're like very closely coupled now more than ever before?
Yeah, I would say you have to be, otherwise all you're essentially doing is creating like really flashy UI elements, but no real like sense of functionality behind it. Like if I'm talking about like portfolios I've seen over the years, especially designers who are starting out, designers who are actually like thinking about their designs and what it does, like that actually shows.
It shows. Exactly.
So yeah, when it comes to the amount of design work I've done, of course, like went through a couple of transitions there. So firstly, working with Sketch, which was the primary design tool from 2018 till I think 2019.
Yeah, those were the first things when I joined Balsamic and Sketch.
Yeah,
the first ones I saw.
Yeah, I've used both tools, and I mean, the main challenge with Sketch was that, of course, it was platform specific. You had to have an Apple device to use it.
Huge challenge.
Then any kind of collaboration or handoff had to happen through like Google Drive file sync, export screens, and then show it to the team, gather comments on those images, and then work with that.
Yeah.
So to overcome that bit of friction, we switched from like Sketch to Figma after figuring out that Figma is actually like really good when it comes to collaborations, just like a design tool where you can collectively come in and work on things, or just leave comments and go back and forth. So Figma became pretty important for us once we adopted it. And, of course, adopting something new, like, had its own set of challenges. Like, there were back when we started using it, there were some features that Sketch had that were slightly more useful than what's it called? Figma at the time. But Figma's community grew and just like ballooned into something super crazy. And now, Figma got bought up for $20 billion.
Yeah, Adobe. Yeah.
A lot of mixed feelings about that, but I'm hoping that, there's more autonomy on Figma's side, because it's such a great tool with a great community. So, that being said, like one of the main problems or main challenges we had to overcome, especially when it came to communicating ideas, or even like whether it's at the initial stage, like pitches, proposals, or even at the project level when we're trying to communicate ideas after a design sprint. Like one of the things we were really lacking on still at the time was like prototyping. Like prototyping was a relatively new skill set for a lot of people to pick up.
Yeah.
So that took a bit of time to adopt, and it really kicked off around pandemic times when like I had to work on a very specific project with the telco team, and I was pushed to do this, like just really at the project level every week present my ideas in a clickable format, and then have detailed interactions wherever necessary, just so that you can get all the stories and all the requirements in line. So
very difficult to make someone in our field understand something that we are envisioning without some sort of active prototype or something.
Yeah. So of course, it varies from stakeholder to stakeholder. There were certain stakeholders at the time who would be able to glean more from less. But then, that would start to change.
Yeah.
And then one of the main targets that we had to fulfill was like generating more sales through prototypes. So that's one of those things that really caught on heavily. Like we were actually pushed to really like push the envelope and see how far we could take these interactive prototypes and just get our ideas front and center. So, like depending on your skill level and the scope of whatever prototype you're building, of course, like, it's you have a lot more creative freedom when you're working towards sales, and you have to kind of dial that down significantly with decisions and verification from internal stakeholders, specifically like the development team, the product team, and of course management. So that being said, we like the scope of like our design deliveries increased dramatically, collaboration also increased dramatically, and we've been able to deliver a lot in a lot less time. Of course, when it comes to the ideation stage, that's where we've excelled in a lot of ways. Of course, doesn't always land the way you want it, but each situation is a perfect learning experience for whoever delivers on that. So, like, I would say when it comes to, let's say, projects, right? One of the challenges I was faced with when working on projects is that I could create like nice prototypes, have everything arranged and organized by like user stories and all of that stuff. But no matter how organized I am, one thing usually remained was that the design you make versus the actual product.
Yeah.
Like, you were lucky if you could even get 75 to 80% of the UI right.
Yeah, I thought it was just for me. I didn't know this was like a common thing for all projects.
I would say it's common in like the software industry in general. Unless you have like a very diligent development process and have like really good front end talent who can back that up actually. Right. So in terms of the talent we have a lot of really good like back end and front end, but mostly back end talents, right?
Yeah.
So why would you want to ask someone to work on UI like when that's something they should be focusing more on?
I mean,
right?
They will work on the UI, the developers, but their primary focus is always going to be functionality, and they're always like happy about functionality rather than about design.
And that's entirely understandable too, because the amount of effort it takes to actually build UI from scratch, like unless you're using like a microservice repository where everything is kind of built and fleshed out and updated, it's really tough to go with these things like completely from scratch. Like, let's say a completely new project comes in that requires let's say a much simpler design system than some of the enterprise solutions we provide. That's when you have to kind of do things from scratch. Even in the design front, of course, that's something we'll have to do, but handing things off and having the developers work on it to that level of perfection takes a lot of time. So one of the things that Tawhid and I, under Rajiv Bhai's direction, we explored was this process called design to code, right? So design to code is essentially a way to convert like a design from, let's say, Figma, Adobe XD, or Sketch, like you converting usable code from like a design tool, like designs from the design tool into usable code that developers can work on.
Okay.
Right. So when it comes to this, there are quite a few platforms that are active. Specifically, let's say when it comes to the different categories of design to code, you have low code, you have no code, and then you have just like as close to like pure code as possible. Right. So when it comes to, let's say, no code platforms, Wix, then you have what else? I think there's this other thing called elegant themes, and then you have there are a lot of WordPress page building stuff. Elementor also comes to mind, like simpler page building tools where you can like build your own website pages and have whatever control the tool allows you to have, right? So
just for maybe very small businesses where you don't really want to invest into it much, just really quickly set up a website and just go for it. So I
mean, some of these platforms have really worked towards more enterprise grade stuff, but the challenge always remains that the code that is generated from their content delivery system, as well as their design or page building tools is, it can be heavy. It can also be very proprietary. So like working on top of that gets a bit difficult. It's a little bit more flexible with something like Webflow. Webflow has a bit more advanced page building tools that's like compared to something like Wix, but you can actually add a lot of functionality to it while you're building it.
Right. So it's different from design to code, right?
Yes.
Not the same thing.
It is a subcategory of
subcategory,
so
right?
That is low code. Like, so if you use Wix as an example of no code, low code is something like Webflow.
Yeah.
And now development friendly code or developer friendly code, as we like to call it, is what Anima does. So Anima is this company based in Israel, actually. So they've been active for 8 years.
Okay.
And in that time, they have initially it started off as a prototyping tool before the days of Figma. Like you would use it with Sketch and then like do the animations and stuff, because Sketch didn't have that level of prototyping, like where you could interact with it. The way it would work is you would have to install a plugin and then export images separately, like in InVision, right? You export it into InVision and then you define the clickable zones and a lot of extra effort. So Anima started off primarily as a prototyping tool, but then as they were like prototyping tool in the sense that they started off with a more like a raster video based approach, and then they moved into code generation. So when they went into that mode, what essentially happened was teams, design teams would use it to hand off like code snippets or entire code outputs of like pages into like to the development teams, and then the dev teams would just clean up that code and use it. And one of the important things that I would address, which we just talked about earlier, is the impression, right? Like the negative impression of imperfect UI. Right. So Anima would address that and also reduce the amount of time taken to build the UI from scratch. So some of the case studies that they have, like development time overhead would go as low as like it could be lowered as much as like 33%.
Oh wow!
Because you're not building the UI from scratch. You are getting code. Like you still have to work on the code, but you don't have to build it from scratch. You don't have to put in every div and define every class. So definitely, like, saves a lot of time. Is there anything else that it helps with? Yes. So right now it's at the beta stage. So the Bhutan team, they have their own design system, Sapphire, as it's called. They've transferred everything to Storybook. So Storybook is like a documentation and repository platform for like design systems, but in coded form.
Okay.
So what Anima can do is it can also import from Storybook into Figma. So you don't have to create all these components from scratch.
Right. Just a library you pull from there.
Like you pull from there, like all the constraints or measurements that are maintained or whatever design tokens are maintained, they all get applied into this Figma file. So that's something we're looking forward to exploring, because the Bhutan team has that in hand. So like sitting with like the senior dev teams who have contributed to this and just figuring out how to set that up is the next step. And for design to code itself, we've lined up one specific project from FinTech. I think it's Corso. It's still kind of pending kickoff, but we have resources ready to just get that going in that front. So the idea for this is to kind of measure, right? Like we're not just going to provide these outputs, we're also going to measure the amount of time it takes to fully realize a particular segment of work. So it will also be based on like initial estimations, like if a dev was to work from scratch versus using something that's existing, and versus using something like the code output from Anima. So the really cool thing about Anima is like the web tool, you can actually use it as a like HTML, CSS, or React or Vue.js preview.
Okay.
Of like, it's like, it'll act like a live website in terms of interactions. It won't have functionality baked into it. That's when the front end team and back end teams come in. But like the UI will work based on how you've defined it. Like whether it's an interactive component like a button, or a static component, right? So all these classes and all that, depending on how organized your design system is, you have ready-made like UI that can be used.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Like you mentioned that how design to code is going to reduce the development time. It's going to be more efficient for developers and everything. So what about on the flip side for designers? Is there a learning curve to it, or does it increase the time that it takes to make a design?
Of course, adoption, like we're still kind of in the adoption stage, right? Because like we as designers have to figure out what's the best way to organize our design files, right down to the naming conventions of each and every layer that we're using, right? Because like if you think of frames in Figma, a frame is like a div, right? But then divs also have their own classes attached to them. So defining all that stuff is still something we are like trying to figure out and see where we can face issues, because our initial findings weren't exactly perfect, but they were still workable, right? So the challenge will be to see really like how much of that code is actually viable for the developers who are using it. If they're like, one of the things we have in mind is to have some developers like either assigned to us or hired into our creative team, so that we can manage this kind of like code cleanup and maintenance on our side. So yeah, it's quite a lot, but I'm hoping that once it kicks off, it can, we can do a lot more with a lot less time. And that's one of the things we're hoping for.
So your preferred tool for doing this kind of designs is Anima or Figma?
Figma, yeah. Figma is like the preferred tool, and I mean, you can see how like got bought out by Adobe for 20 billion. Like it's huge valuation.
It's great. I mean, we really felt that Figma was a game changer for us when we like started using it. It was really good. It was much different from the previous applications that we were using for designs. So like within this 4.5 years of time that you've been here, you saw a lot of change, right? You went from Sketch to maybe InVision and then to Figma, and now things are changing with design to code. What do you feel like is gonna change further in the next 5 years?
Okay. I mean, there's a whole lot that will happen actually. For all I know, there's even scope for Anima to even get bought out. If like it's already pretty robust, even with the small community that it has. But like it's one of those things that of course adoption is going to have it's going to require me or Tawhid to actually have everyone buy in before we go forward with it. So that's been kind of some of the challenges we've been facing. Like it's not easy to get everyone to adopt to something that's already existing. So with Corsal, we're hoping that since it's a brand new project, this is something we can explore at ease without dealing with too many dependencies. So hoping for that to kick off. And it's pretty exciting stuff. I'm not like, a lot of the misconceptions that come with this actually is that some of the developers are thinking like, oh, like is my job going to be at risk or something? It's like, no, it's not going to be. You're just going to make your job easier.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Like not just you don't have to spend too much time building the UI, so you can focus more on the functionality, which is of course what you always want, right? So like if you're interested in that kind of approach for Product Lab, of course we are always open to this kind of thing.
Yeah, great. We'll talk about this in a separate session.
Yeah, of course.
No, for sure. I think it's very exciting, the kind of work because I mean, that's the beauty of technology, right? There's like, you don't have any time to get bored. It's going to constantly keep changing and keep you on your toes, and there will always be new challenges and new things to learn. That's the good part of it. That's why we're in this. So I think this is a great thing for designers as well, because they have a whole new set of things to learn now with
definitely. Because I would say like in terms of learning or just general satisfaction with whatever I do, like I don't really have any kind of satisfaction with what I do, because I always feel like can be improved.
Exactly.
Of course, but
true for everything.
If you have a commitment, you have a commitment. Of course, that has to be fulfilled. So after a while, I've learned to let that go quite a bit too. So that's one of the good things. So 4.5 years. So my next challenge will be more product based rather than what I've been doing, which has been
project specific,
which has been mostly sales related or certain customer facing projects. And then main thing I will really miss that I've enjoyed so far here is just like mentorship, learning from everyone else, also teaching as much as I can to those who are looking to learn, right? So I would say that has been one of the most fulfilling aspects of working here. So that challenge will be a bit different going forward once I move on, but I would say SELISE has armed me with more than enough knowledge and experience in such a short time.
Good to hear that. And I mean, the little time that we got to work together was actually very good for me as well, because I was completely new here as well at that time. It was very comfortable to work with you, because I did not have to tell you a lot of information. You just could just start off with the limited information that I had, and that's what I wanted my designers to be able to think for themselves.
I've always tried to kind of push that, and it differs from designer to designer, of course, to find that kind of motivation and to get them out of their comfort zones as well. So it's been nice to see everyone grow in the 4.5 years I've spent here. Even the team growing from let's say when I joined in the consulting team, there was no creative team back then. So
such a small team.
The consulting team, I think when I joined, was 6 or 7 designers maximum. Right. 6 or 7 designers doing everything at that time. Now it's 20. So 20 is probably one of the biggest UX teams here, in terms of a full-fledged software company. So I'm actually I would say I'm very proud to have been a part of that.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And I guess on that note, we can probably end the discussion here. And thank you so much. It was really good actually talking to you and catching up.
Yeah.
So
likewise.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me.